The poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, begins as, "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table." Right from the very start, by addressing itself to a fictional person, the poem is announcing that it is a dramatic monologue. We know that a dialogue is two people talking and monologue must be one person talking, because mono means one. The poem is dramatic because it is written in the voice of a speaker other than the poet. This we have read while reading dramatic monologue, literary term also. We know this from the title. The title tells us that the speaker is a person and the name of that person is J. Alfred Prufrock, and this is his song. In ancient time, poems were called songs. So this is the song of a person and the name of that person is J. Alfred Prufrock. It's not clear who Prufrock is singing to, but the title gives us a hint. Love songs are usually sung to people you are in love with. So Prufrock is addressing someone he loves. Prufrock tells us the time of the day that we are taking this trip. The time of the day is evening. But this is not ordinary evening. This evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon the table. The image compares the evening sky to a patient on an operating table and given ether, a kind of anesthetic, to numb the pain of the surgery that is about to happen. So here the speaker is saying, "Let us go then, you and I." And the evening, it is the time of evening, and evening here is compared. There is a use of simile. Evening is compared with the patient who is etherized and who is laying on the table. And the same way, evening is spread out against the sky. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Prufrock repeats his invitation for us to come along with him. Let us go. He says, let us go. And he is going to take us through half-deserted streets where people walk around muttering to themselves. There are the kind of streets that are filled with cheap hotels where you might stay for one night only as a last resort if you had no other options. The street has restaurants. Actually, these are the kind of restaurants that have sawdust on the floor to clear up all the liquor that people are spilling as they start to get drunk. It's also littered with oyster shells that no one bothers to clean up. Half deserted makes the streets sound pretty sketchy, and one night cheap hotels only adds to this impression. So these lines explain the atmosphere of the place. Which kind of the place is this, from where Prufrock is going? Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights. Here is an example of transferred epithet also. Restless nights. Nights are not restless, but people are restless. So this is the example of transferred epithet. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. The streets twist and turn like a tedious argument. It's an argument with insidious intent. The streets are so confusing, it is as if they were trying to trick us into getting lost. The streets are leading somewhere, however, they lead to an overwhelming question, a question of huge and possibly life altering significance. Prufrock is not going to tell us, and he does not even want us to ask what it is. If we want to find out, we are going to have to take a walk with him. He repeats his favorite phrase, that is, let us go, for third time here. And he is taking the person who is going with him to the place. He says, in the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Women are entering and leaving a room, and they are talking about an Italian Renaissance painter, Michelangelo. Eliot loves those Italians. The quote is adopted from a poem of the 19th century French writer Jules Laforge. This is a quotation taken from a French writer. The women must be pretty high class to be talking about Renaissance art, but their repeated action of coming and going seems surprisingly pointless. Eliot further writes in the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Here, the metaphorical language is used by the poet. The streets are filled with the yellow fog, which sounds really nasty. This detail might allow us to understand the location of the poem. By reading these lines, we can understand what is the location, what is the atmosphere of the place from where Prufrock and his companion are passing through. This fog, there is a foggy atmosphere, and this fog seems pretty acrobatic. It is moving, and it is compared with a cat. It has a back and a muzzle which sounds like either a dog or a cat. Also, it licks things and makes sudden leaps. It sounds like a cat. The poet has used here a metaphor. The poem is comparing the quiet, sneaky, and athletic movement of the fog to a common house cat. The fog is wandering around the streets like a cat wanders around a house. Finally, the fog gets tired and curls around the city houses to fall asleep like a cat would curl around something smaller, maybe the leg of a table or a chair. And the time is a soft October night. It means the poem is set in autumn season. So by reading these lines, we can understand the atmosphere of the place, and it is very beautifully described. The foggy atmosphere is described as a cat. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon window panes. Eliot knew a lot about literature. He has read many books, and This is reflected in the poem, and he could make subtle references to all kinds of literary figures. Here, the phrase, there will be time, it refers to a poem written by 17th century poet Andrew Marvell. He uses this phrase in his poem to his coy mistress, there will be time. Prufrock, however, uses the reference to time in exactly the opposite way. He thinks that there is plenty of time for delays and dawdling. Just like in Marvell's poem, Prufrock addresses himself to a mistress, someone he loves, but here it's Prufrock and not the mistress who is being coy. And in to his coy mistress, there is just opposite to the scene. By talking about the smoke, he is trying to justify the fact that he wasted our time with an entire range of description of the fog instead of asking that overwhelming question he told us about.